This video is for educational and infotainment purposes only. It is not intended to encourage or glorify the use of illegal drugs, violence, or criminal activity in any way. Ismael Zambada Garcia, aka El Mayo, notorious leader of the Sinaloa drug cartel, who was arrested on U.S. soil in July of 2024, is scheduled to be leaving El Paso, Texas, where he is currently being held, headed to Brooklyn, New York. Meanwhile, two former cartel members who were instrumental in bringing down El Chapo have emerged from protective custody to comment on their time with El Mayo. They've been dubbed as traitors by cartel operatives and unprecedented cooperators by law enforcement. These two are now back in the public eye. So who are they and what did they have to say? Well, you're about to find out. I'm Joshua Roberts, attorney at law, and you are watching A Lawyer Up. This is episode 4 of the arrest and trial of El Mayo. And as a leader of one of the world's largest and most brutal drug trafficking organizations, El Mayo was recently described quite differently than the narco stereotype portrayed on TV. Unlike his partner, former Sinaloa Cartel boss Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, El Mayo has operated largely out of the glare of public and media attention. He dresses simply and prefers life on one of his many cattle ranches to the extravagant parties, yachts, and beachside nightclubs. This according to Pedro and Margarito Flores, twin brothers who are convicted drug traffickers from Chicago's Little Village neighborhood. These two are widely considered the main insiders who brought down El Chapo. They were also integral in helping the U.S. government bring indictments against a slew of other Sinaloa cartel figures, including Zambada. The brothers recently did an interview with the Chicago Tribune about the arrest of El Mayo. But before we get to the interview, let's talk a little bit about who these guys are. Between 2005 and 2008, the Flores brothers operated a Chicago-based distribution cell for the Sinaloa Cartel and a rival drug trafficking organization controlled by Arturo Beltran Leyva. They received on average 2,000 kilos of cocaine per month. The cocaine was then distributed to customers in Chicago, Columbus, Cincinnati, Detroit, Milwaukee, New York, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., and even into Vancouver, Canada, among other cities. In total, the brothers admitted to facilitating the transfer of approximately $1.8 billion of drug proceeds from the United States back to Mexico, primarily through bulk cash smuggling. Now, at great personal risk to themselves and their families, the Flores brothers began cooperating with the government in October of 2008, and they recorded conversations, including 2 directly with El Chapo. Their cooperation resulted in indictments against leaders of the Sinaloa Cartel and the Beltran Leyva organization, as well as the complete dismantling of their Chicago-based criminal enterprise. By the end of 2008, their cooperation facilitated approximately a dozen seizures in the Chicago area, totaling hundreds of kilos of cocaine and heroin and more than $15 million in cash. Cooperation by the Flores brothers also resulted in convictions of more than a dozen high-level distributors. The two would plead guilty in federal court, and at sentencing of the Flores brothers, U.S. District Chief Judge Ruben Castillo said that, quote, "But for the Flores brothers' cooperation, he would have imposed a life sentence." End quote. He also noted that because of the peril their ongoing cooperation posed to them and their families, they effectively are going to leave the courthouse with a life sentence. Quote, "The Flores brothers and their families will live the rest of their lives in danger of being killed in retribution," the prosecutors would say in a sentencing memorandum. Quote, The ruthlessness of cartel is legend, with a special place reserved for those who cooperate, end quote. So that's who the Flores brothers are. Now let's hear what they had to say about El Mayo. Quote, "He's a straight-up rancher, old school," said Pedro Flores. Quote, "The way he treated people, he was the most understanding, always looking to please the people around him," end quote. Flores spoke to the Tribune with his longtime attorney. This followed the bombshell news that Zambada had been arrested in Texas along with one of El Chapo's son, Joaquin Guzman Lopez. Flores said he was shocked by the development, with reports that Zambada had been tricked by an associate or even kidnapped to get him across the U.S. border. Quote, "It's a big win for the U.S. government," said Flores, who is living in an undisclosed location after completing his 14-year prison sentence. He would go on to say, "I think he's cooperating. Everybody gets tired of that life at some point." It's important to note that El Mayo's arrest is in many ways a culmination of the extraordinary cooperation that the Flores twins embarked on nearly 2 decades ago, agreeing to work with DEA agents while still living in Mexico and dealing directly with the Sinaloa's upper echelon leaders. And while much has been made of the recordings the twins made of El Chapo, both Pedro Flores and his brother Margarito told the Tribune that they more often dealt with El Mayo, who they said embodied many of the same characteristics as their father, Margarito Sr. Now, Margarito Jr., who goes by Jay, recalled in the interview how Zambada, quote, "never used the phone, ever, preferring to meet face-to-face at one of his many ranches around central Mexico." Flores said that most of their meetings took place under the shade of a tree, with Zambada in his Timberland boots. Quote, "It was simple. It wasn't Tony Montana and Scarface," he said. "He reminded me a lot of my father," end quote. And as a side and sad note, in 2009, their father was kidnapped and presumed killed when he re-entered Mexico, despite the U.S. government's warning him not to do so. Both of the twins also said that Zambada's dream was to buy up all of the fertile farmland along the Sinaloa coast. Quote, he said he wanted to own all of the land, from Culiacan to Mazatlan, and that was from Pedro Flores. The twins acknowledged that the cartel was vicious and responsible for innumerable acts of violence. But unlike El Chapo, they said Zambada would insulate himself from the day-to-day realities of the cartel world, delegating authority to his sons and others. El Mayo's arrest comes more than a decade after his son, Vicente Zambada Nibla, the one-time heir apparent to his portion of the Sinaloa Cartel, was arrested on charges brought in Chicago. He would eventually agree to cooperate against his father and actually testified against El Chapo at his trial. Nicknamed Vicentillo, he admitted playing a key role in trafficking thousands of pounds of cocaine and heroin into the United States using speedboats, submarines, and jumbo jets. He had faced the possibility of life in prison, but his sentence was reduced to 15 years in 2019 after the judge credited him for what prosecutors called, quote, unrivaled cooperation. Known for his flashy lifestyle and hard partying, Zambada Nibla was arrested by Mexican authorities in 2009 after the Flores twins made recordings of him talking about massive drug shipments, obtaining grenades and explosives, and even attacking government buildings in Mexico in retaliation against law enforcement. Information from the Flores twins also led to another son of Zambada. This is Ismael Zambada Imperial, pleading guilty in U.S. federal court in San Diego in 2021 to being a leader of the Sinaloa Cartel. And further information they provided has led to indictments against several of El Chapo's other sons, known as the Little Chapos or Los Chapitos, who have been identified as one of the main exporters of fentanyl, which is a deadly synthetic opioid, into the United States. One of them, Ovidio Guzman Lopez, was arrested and extradited to the United States last year. He has pleaded not guilty to drug trafficking charges and is being held without bond. And now another Chapito, Joaquin Jr., has been taken into U.S. custody. In total, 28 members of the notorious Sinaloa Cartel have been charged as part of a multi-jurisdictional fentanyl trafficking prosecution out of Chicago, based in part on information provided from the Flores Twins. These indictments allege that Los Chapitos has assumed the day-to-day control of the cartel after their father's arrest in 2016 and accuses the sons of orchestrating the shipment of thousands of pounds of cocaine, marijuana, and other drugs into the U.S. by rail, road, through tunnels, and other means. The sons also allegedly furthered the conspiracy by bribing public officials and using guns and other dangerous weapons to commit violence, including murder, kidnapping, and assault against law enforcement, rival drug traffickers, and members of their own trafficking organization. That all from its indictment. Two of El Chapo's other sons, also charged in Chicago, Jesus Alfredo Guzman Salazar and Ivan Archivaldo Guzman Salazar, remain at large. For Pedro and Margarito Flores, seeing all of the attention on El Mayo is now somewhat ironic, since they said that they tried to tell authorities more information about him during their cooperation, but the authorities were not really interested. Quote, "He wasn't the target. The prize was Chapo," Margarito Flores said. "Once the government focuses on their prize, that's it. They're not even looking at who's sitting right next to him." End quote. So those were the comments from two of the most notorious government cooperators of all time. And with El Mayo and El Chapo now both behind bars, it begs the question, just who is running the Sinaloa Cartel? Well, we have an upcoming video answering that very question. Make sure you subscribe to get all of the updates regarding this matter as it proceeds through the court system. If you're interested, check out my full-length videos on El Mayo's life, on El Chapo. These detail exactly how they got their start and evolved in the drug trafficking world. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, and share. That's all I have for you today. My name is Joshua Roberts, attorney at law, and you've been watching Lawyer Up.